Hello everyone, this is update for October 15, 2022, day 234 of the war, end of the date update. So we're just going to start with a general information, general sort of overview. The most important development is that Russian troops are arriving back to Belarus. Specifically, they were spotted. The trains with Russian troops were arriving to Homel, which is large regional center, and it's a springboard for attack on Ukraine on the sort of the central northern part of Ukraine. That's what used in the past in February and March. Looks like um, there are plans to open up sort of again this northern front line, and there are a lot of sort of speculations, reports mm, on the Russian sort of propaganda channels that there will be new attack from north within months. I'm just sharing it at sort of face value. I'm not saying that um, you know it's possible to predict probability of that happening. The only the only way that this could be viable sort of attack we can explain is the following: is, let's say, this mobilization, the way it's going, like let's say 300,000 soldiers go to refill existing Russian units that were deployed in Ukraine and were fighting, so that they can maintain existing front line, right? But then we discussed that there's extremely a lot of evidence that there's more than 300,000 soldiers being conscripted, and the number looks more towards a million, right? So if you have then, let's say 500,000 or 600,000, you can try to attack again from north and try to capture Kiev, right? If you have, let's say, 500,000 soldiers, you have a chance. Let's put this way. This is the only way that can be explained. This, otherwise this is probably just a show, just a distraction show by Russian and Belarus uh, leadership, just to keep Ukrainian units uh, up north there, in to potentially as a defense, as against the potential renewed Russian attack there. So again, uh, this is the only explanation, the way to explain it. At the same time, this soldiers, this new conscripts, even let's say 500,000, right, for this northern attacking force, they totally not prepared. There's simply not enough time, and giving the time frame within a month that's being claimed by Russian propaganda channels, it's totally, it's just a sort of uh, crazy adventure, let's put this way, because the soldiers, you cannot prepare soldiers, especially to fight in a street fighting in a large multi-million city. It requires skills, it requires knowledge, it requires extremely high level of coordination between the units, within the cohesion within the unit. So this is just from that perspective, it doesn't make any sense. At the same time, sort of predict insanity of uh, let's say Russian side is really impossible. So anything is possible theoretically. Mm, but I would say that probability of that is pretty low. We'll keep monitoring the situation there to provide more updates. Then at the same time, another contradictory factor here is there were a lot of reports of the Belarus equipment that's being transferred to Russian troops and being transferred out of Belarus into Russia, right? So it also kind of doesn't make sense when transferring that equipment that you would need for attack outside of Belarus and into sort of Russian territory, where the Russian troops are sort of preparing um, for the attack. So again, this whole situation looks very uh, potentially just kind of like a fake story, but at the same time, we'll keep monitoring. It's theoretically possible, as I said, given that the number of conscripts is definitely much higher than 300,000, and you probably need at least 500,000 troops to successfully capture Kiev within a reasonable period of time, let's say within 2 weeks. And really, you need more like, I would say, 700, 800,000 to do it in a relatively decisive way, and so on. So this, we may explain. Let's see. Let's keep watching. Related probably to this is also another data point, is that Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China urged its citizens, those who still remain in Ukraine and didn't flee, to immediately leave the country. Right. That's also, as we all know, Russia is China is sort of silent Russian ally that's sort of effectively participating, but at the same time not participating, as opposed to Iran, which is openly participating and supporting Russia. By the way, now there are again rumors on the Russian side that being spread on Russian propaganda channels that Iran now supplying UAVs, new UAVs to Russian military. It's called Arash 2. It's fairly fresh UAV that was apparently introduced only in 2022. There is unfortunately not much specification information. The only sort of like very general information that's available is that it's a long range between 1500 and 2000 kilometers, which obviously is really opens up a lot of possibilities. Let's put it this way. On the weak side, the cruising speed is about, if that's correct, is about 150 kilometers plus minus, up to 200 somewhere. Again, there's no sort of exact information. This is all kind of like rough ballparking, right? And then in terms of payload, the amount of high explosives that it can carry, apparently it's larger than Shahid 136, which I think has like 40 kilograms up to 50 kilograms of high explosive. So there are sources that say it's up to 100. So apparently it's probably, let's say, 60 to 100 kilograms, which is pretty significant, and that really again opens up more possibilities, right? So again, all of this news don't look very sort of, let's say, very good. Like at the same time, there is a very good chance that all of this is simply rumors, and just a desire to create sort of false reality, right? So remains to be. We'll see how all of these items are gonna develop and what's gonna happen there. Now let's actually switch to the front line and let's see what's going there. And before we actually go to front line, one more thing. Russian military continued trimmed down version of the attacks against Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Again, as I said yesterday, it's, let's say, at most 10% of their first 2 days, probably even dropped to like 5%. Yes, the damage is being done. There is a couple more percent of capacity has been lost. There are blackouts or forced blackouts when people kind of have to sort of shut down and not use electricity. All of that is happening. The system for now is stable. I'm not saying that it's in great condition. It's basically living off basically band-aids. So it's stable on band-aids, which is not great sort of situation at all. So what's gonna happen, especially even let's say everything stays stable, there are no more attacks. What's gonna happen with the system in the winter remains to be seen. There's still high chance of the system, an energy system, collapsing even on its own, because winter is a stress time for energy system from demand for electricity, from the harsh conditions. So everything is basically tested, right? It's a test time. It's a stress test. So there is high chance that because system is living on band-aids that some of those band-aids will be sort of let's say blow up, and then the whole system will disintegrate into basically a bunch of islands, as I described before. So again, this is potentially going into winter, and typically like November, December, it's obviously cold months, but they usually, or nobody don't have a crystal ball, but usually December is not terribly cold months in Ukraine. Where it really gets cold is really January, right? January is really cold months, and then February becomes turns into kind of like again relatively warm and sleety months basically, and then March kind of somewhat similar but a little bit more warmer. So that's kind of like the bottom is really just really January. So that's kind of like will be sort of danger point for Ukraine. Ukrainian side is also responding sort of tit for tat attacks against Russian energy infrastructures. There were a couple attacks again in Belgorod region here around Belgorod, and then I think close to Valuki. So, but those attacks are no match to Russian attacks because, as I discussed, it's just like pinch of a needle for elephant essentially, because Russian energy system is extremely strong, extremely powerful, extremely distributed. So quickly providing electricity to Belgorod is totally not a problem. The biggest sort of challenge where Russian side faces is really psychology, because it's probably forcing a lot of people to flee and leave. Essentially, this becomes kind of like a dead zone for the Russian side, basically. Now let's finally jump into the military update. Situation along the state border is somewhat intense for the reasons I just explained, right? So that's just very logical. Now let's quickly jump to the North Luhansk front line. What is very clear, Russian troops are attempting to counterattack, and the same sort of axis of counterattack is this Terni and a little bit north of Terni. This essentially they try to split Ukrainian troops that are between these two rivers into two pieces, and then obviously destroy each piece separately. At the same time, Russian sources report that Ukrainian command assembled large group of troops here in attempt in with sort of impending offensive was obviously goal Svatove. This is obviously just I wouldn't even say superficial, but could be just sort of panicky reports on the Russian side, just to kind of like um, maybe like sort of psychological response, let's say, and just kind of like, well, letting Ukrainian command know, okay, we know you want to do this, sort of kind of don't do it because we're prepared. Remains to be seen what's going to happen here. What is very clear is that Ukrainian troops are sort of uh, advancing at a snail pace here, totally slow, extremely slow advance. Uh, as I said, it's almost close to kind of say like no advance. Well, I wouldn't say it's no advance, but extremely slow advance. Total, night and day to what's been going on about months ago. So, as I said, the opportunity here for exploitation of that situation that was months ago has been completely lost, and it's not coming back because Russian conscripts are sort of flooding this front line specifically, and also Kherson bridgehead, because those two are most critical in the most critical condition on the Russian side, and Russian side wants to keep the status quo at all costs right now. Now let's see what's going on the North Donbass section of the front line. Here it was actually pretty, pretty hot. Wagner mercenaries actively were attacking in this kind of like slightly north of Bakhmut. So as you can see, everything here has been attacked, especially along this uh, section of the road that's still being controlled by Ukrainian troops. then also attacks in Bakhmut itself, and then even also straight south of it. So basically, the sort of idea here is very straightforward. What Russian command is trying to achieve, they just want to kind of put a wedge here, put a wedge here, and create very uncomfortable situation for Ukrainian troops and kind of force withdrawal from Bakhmut. So far, they far from that, but they keep hammering at it every day. Now let's move to central Donbass section of the front line. Things here are also pretty active relative to previous days. As you can see, Russian troops are trying to attack here in many places. The most notable is it's always sort of center of attacks is here Piski, and I just show one sort of line, but it's actually kind of like in all directions essentially. There's pretty much attacks here along this whole sector of this semicircle. Then, as you can see, again, renewed attempts to attack from this northeast here to create encirclement of Avdiivka without much success here. And then attacks here in this kind of like Mariinka area, south of it, and Novomikhailivka again. So it's pretty active without much Russian success, but this probably could be explained by the sort of receiving sort of new, fresh soldiers, all of those conscripts. So then, the machine starts to work again, more or less. This is explanation, somewhat speculative. I'm not saying that there is confirmed information, because based on the prior information that I had, it's most of the sort of priority front lines are North Luhansk and Kherson, not this area here. Now let's quickly check Zaporizhya front line. Things here are quiet, no changes, nothing really to add here. Now let's finally look at Kherson bridgehead. Situation here is more or less stable, except for a failed offensive attempt by Ukrainian forces. As you can see, they were trying to sort of kind of attack here, and obviously the objective is Novakhovka. There's no question about it. Russian resources claim that this attack was repelled and Ukrainian troops didn't gain anything. We don't have confirmation actually that that's true, but it's obviously going to be clear in a day or two. It's going to become very clear if there was any success by Ukrainian forces, or it's just another failed attempt. But it's very clear that Russian side managed to regain control of their own sort of resources, of their own side, because before it was a borderline panic essentially. At the same time, Russian regime here that was installed, they are calling for civilian to evacuate from this western side of Dnipro River, basically from Kherson bridgehead. So that sort of gives another sort of angle at what sort of military, let's say, civilian military administration on the Russian side is sort of doing and how it's viewing the future of this bridgehead. Again, just want to reiterate, the future of this bridgehead is sort of sealed as long as attacks continue against the bridges, ferries, and all of that. This is obviously if there is attack up from north on Kiev in this number 700,000 soldiers, then obviously this all of the Ukrainian resources that are available will be pulled up north. So again, that's a big question mark there, but in my opinion, the chances or probability of the attack up from north looks low right now, but at the same time, the situation needs to be monitored to really understand better situation, where it goes, the trends, where it's going to happen. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.